Well, hello and welcome to Restore Live. Restore Live going out to just the YouTube channel. We seem to have had a problem with the Twitter channel. So if you'll just bear with me for a second, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to reconnect. That's on Twitter, and let's just see, does it happen? Just by trying, let's just see, does it go? And if not, we'll get on with what it is that we're here to do. No, seems that we can't get on to Twitter. So anyway, what it is that we're here for this evening is that we're here to talk about something that is happening in our news as we speak. Just yesterday, we noted that there were several press reports and several news and media outlets, and they were reporting that there is a deal. There is a deal that is coming very, very soon with reference to the talks on the Northern Ireland Protocol, which are between the British government and the EU. Now, whenever we look at the scenario in the round, and we look at all information that's, let's just say, available, what we can tell is that, well, according to the reports, they say that the DUPs 7 tests will be met, and well, you might think that that's a good thing. So we had a look at those tests, the DUP 7 tests, quite some time ago, and well, we didn't really pour over them too much. But however, I can remember thinking whenever I looked at those tests, well, I mean, I could have drafted tests which were more watertight than the DUP's tests. So what I wanted to do this evening is I wanted to come on Restore UK, and I wanted to talk about the DUP's tests, and we're by, let's say, for example, the EU or anyone else that would have a vested interest. So what we want to do is that we want to now go on to the DUP's 7 test by popping up a little overlay on my screen so that we can commence with number 1 of those tests, and we're going to commence reading once this is up on the screen. Okay, so it says here that any new arrangements must, and it talks about fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union. So we'll read that again. Fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union. Now, the Act of the Union, Article 6. What is Article 6, the Act of the Union? And it says in test number 1 by the DUP that any new arrangements in any new deal between the EU and the British government must fulfil Article 6 of the Act of the Union. Now, we're going to try to read this from, firstly, a Unionist standpoint, and then we'll read it from, let's just say, from an EU standpoint, or a Sinn Féin standpoint, or an Irish government standpoint, all of those people who would like to see the destruction of the United Kingdom. But firstly, let's read that from a Unionist standpoint. So what does it mean whenever the DUP say, fulfill Article 6 of the Act of the Union? Focus on that word, fulfill. You know, what does fulfill the Act of the Union mean? Whenever we've learned through the Supreme Court that the Act of the Union, or the Acts of Union, specifically Article 6, well, it has been subjugated, it has been disapplied, it has been set aside, it is not functioning. I mean, those are all the words that we could equate with what it was that the Supreme Court actually delivered. So when Article 6 of the Act of the Union, which provides for trade between England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, when that has been disapplied, when that is not functioning, what does it mean in the DUP's test to fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union? Well, you see, if Article 6 is all about trade, Scotland and Wales and in Northern Ireland, if it is that people should be on an equal footing, and that's what it says, That's whether you're in Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, or Wales. You should be on an equal footing with any other citizen right around the United Kingdom. What does it mean to fulfil Article 6 of the Act of the Union? Does it mean that the Act of the Union, specifically Article 6, it can remain in a disapplied state, and there has to be another way, there can be another way in which that the premise of or the letter of Article 6 could be, well, again, I'm just going to refer to the DUP's words here, they can be fulfilled. You know, the premise of Article 6, the Act of the Union, which provides for trade, which provide for equal rights right around the United Kingdom, well, the DUP are saying that they want it fulfilled. Now, as I said at the very start, I wanted to read this from a unionist standpoint. And, you know, if I had been drafting that, I would have said that the Act of the Union, specifically Article 6 of the Act of the Union, it needs to be fully restored. Restored. There's a huge difference between restore and fulfill. And one wonders why that word fulfill would be in there. Does that allow for wriggle room? Does that allow for the spirit of the Act of the Union to be fulfilled in another way, whilst the Act of the Union remains in a disapplied state? Let's move on to number 2. And we're reading still from a unionist standpoint. So, any new arrangements must avoid any diversion of trade. Now, again, we're going to focus on that word, avoid any diversion in trade. Now, let me give you a bit of context. The protocol came into being a few years ago, and what has happened since is that there's a border slap bang in the middle of the United Kingdom, trashing the Act of the Union, which provided for trade, which suggested that every citizen should be on an equal footing right around the United Kingdom, that there should be unfettered access between England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. So the DUP's second test here, and this is from a unionist standpoint, is saying that any new arrangements must avoid any diversion of trade. Any new arrangements must avoid any diversion of trade. We can tell you that there, and I'm sure that the people that are watching, you're as well tuned into this as we are, that the proposals that have been in place, in my honest opinion, in my belief, from 2019, and sure wasn't it Doug Beattie that told us that the Ulster Unionist Party, they put into place this thing called the landing zone. And what the landing zone was all about was that there would be, I'm going to say it just plainly, I'm not going to try to mix up the words or mince the words or anything else. Plainly, this landing zone means that the border, which is between England, or which is between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, where the border actually is, this landing zone means that the border would be lifted, physically lifted, and it would be transplanted in Larne, in Belfast, and in Warrenpoint, creating and causing a border in the Irish Sea to some, in the North Channel to others, between Northern Ireland and England, Scotland and Wales. So you see, there would be an EU-inspired customs and regulatory border placed at Larne, at Belfast and at Warrenpoint. And this is what this landing zone means. Now, to provide for that to happen, under what it is that we see that Doug Beattie said that he put in place and his party put in place in 2019, well, when we listen to the letter of that detail of that agreement, when Liz Truss would have delivered it in the Parliament, well, what she said was that there would be green lanes for goods travelling to Northern Ireland. There would be red lanes for goods travelling to the EU. They would be at the ports between England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. Liz Truss went on to further clarify that in the red lane, any goods going down the red lane are destined for the EU, and there would be checks on those goods, and the checks, the detail of what goods were travelling, would be given to the EU. Now, at that time, whenever Liz Truss was actually delivering that, Edwin Poots from the DUP, well, he said that the DUP would have no problem in checking the goods in the red lane, which are destined to the EU. Now, Liz Truss, when she delivered it in the Parliament, the detail of that deal, Dugbeattie's landing zone, she said that the British government would perform checks on the green lane, and that's for goods destined for Northern Ireland. And how that they were going to do that was through a trusted trader scheme for the hauliers coming from England, Scotland and Wales, coming to Northern Ireland. Well, they would have to opt in to this thing called the trusted trader scheme. They would have to be licensed to move goods from England, Scotland and Wales to Northern Ireland. Now, forgive me for saying this, but that constitutes a border in the Irish Sea. That constitutes a border in the North Channel. That constitutes a border between Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and in Wales. We further learn that the Inland Revenue, in conjunction with the EU, they have been testing some digital checks in where the goods could be checked digitally, moving down this green channel into Northern Ireland, and the digital data would be given on to the EU to check on what goods are coming to Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. So you see, this is the detail of that deal. This constitutes a border in the North Channel, in the Irish Sea, between Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales. Now we look back at the DUP's red line here, and number 2 says, avoid any diversions of trade. Well, you see, would it be a diversion? Would it be a diversion if there is a green channel and goods are moving down that green channel, and the goods are being digitally checked by the British government and the data is being given to the EU? Well, you see, that would obviously satisfy it would avoid any diversion of trade, because the trade could move freely down a green channel. But however, it's an EU border. It's an EU customs and regulatory border that is being checked digitally between, and it's being trialled right now, between the Inland Revenue and the EU. Under this scheme, we have a border in the North Channel. We are separated from England, Scotland and Wales in Northern Ireland. And we are not, as per the Act of the Union, Article 6, we are not on an equal footing with England, Scotland and Wales, whenever Northern Ireland is the only place in the entire United Kingdom that has to have these customs and these EU-inspired customs and regulatory checks between us and our brothers and sisters in England, Scotland and in Wales. So reading this from a Unionist standpoint, I'm looking at the number 1 test would be fulfill Article 6 of the Act of the Union. And I've already stated that fulfilling something doesn't mean restoring something, because it could be done in a different way, leaving the Article 6 of the Act of the Union disapplied. To avoid any diversion in trade, this is point number 2. That means that, well, there can be a border between us, England, Scotland and Wales, separating Northern Ireland from England, Scotland and Wales, placing us outside of the UK equation, let's just say, and placing us into the EU. Well, you see, I just wonder, is this written, this DUP 7 tests, is it written in a way which allows for movement, which allows for things to be interpreted in a different way? So let's move on to number 3. Number 3 says, so any new arrangements must not constitute a border in the Irish Sea. Now, must not constitute a border in the Irish Sea. Could it be argued that the trusted trader scheme, the the red and green channel. Now, we already know that the DUP have agreed. They've already given this. They've already agreed that and we have the clip from Poots, whenever Poots said that he would actually perform the checks on the goods in the red lane. So that's already given away by the DUP. So what does this mean in number 3? If they've already given this away, that any new arrangements must not constitute a border in the Irish Sea. Are the DUP going to argue that a red channel for goods being checked going into the EU and a green channel which will have digital checking and documentation, digital data given to the EU on goods coming to Northern Ireland, are they going to try to argue that that does not constitute a border in the North Channel? Is this like drawn in a way that it provides for wriggle room for the DUP to back down, to climb down, to compromise would be the word that I would use. Now, I'm going to draw your attention to something that we seen in the press just at the weekend. And we have several people that work alongside us here in Restore, which feeds data in, unionists who care about this country, and they constantly would find some things of relevance. And what we've seen in the press just at the weekend there, and it was being reported on by Reuters, is how they say it. You see, there was an article from Jeffrey Donaldson just at the weekend there, and it was reported that Jeffrey had said, and if Jeffrey didn't say, well, Jeffrey needs to make it clear that he didn't say this, but it was certainly reported in Reuters that we don't want to make perfect the enemy of the possible. What does that mean? If Jeffrey actually said that, so we don't want to make perfect, we don't want to make the perfect, is his exact words, the enemy of the possible. I mean, I can think of what, if Jeffrey did actually say that, I can think of that, well, if Jeffrey doesn't want to make the perfect the enemy of the possible, does that mean that these tests that we present in front of you are actually drawn in a way that provides for wriggle room for the DUP to compromise, to climb down, to accept a deal which doesn't fully restore Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom? Are they going to try to argue that, well, that they are doing the right thing, that they are standing up for the United Kingdom, when in fact they are actually compromising when unionism in Northern Ireland have nothing left to compromise on? And this is how serious this is, people. It's so serious that this is unionism's last chance of doing anything about, I'm going to say, the giving away, the hiving off of Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, and by extension, the breakup of the entire United Kingdom. This is our last chance to get this right, and we can't get this wrong. And this is why that I decided to come this evening to discuss this, to impress upon the hearts and minds that are out there. Well, and you make up your own mind once you see what it is that we've delivered. Are the DUP doing the right thing? Do they know what they're doing? Are they fully aware of the implications of what they are doing? Did they draw these 7 tests and then away that they're drawn, and I'm going to use this terminology, that they're drawn in a thing called constructive ambiguity, which means, well, different things to different people, which could be actually argued that they didn't actually mean that they would do this when they wanted to do that, and so on and so forth. We've seen this constructive ambiguity before. Wasn't it Jonathan Powell, Tony Blair's chief aide at the time of the Belfast Agreement, whenever the Belfast Agreement was being drafted? Wasn't it Jonathan Powell that said, well, the Belfast Agreement, it was drawn in constructive ambiguity? And what that means is that it means all things to everybody and nothing to none. That's my own take of it. is that, well, it can mean different things to different people. The art of constructive ambiguity is used a lot in government documents. And we wonder, are the DUP deploying constructive ambiguity against unionism? The people that voted for them, that elected them, that put them into place to serve and protect their best interests, are the DUP, have they drawn these 7 tests and in a way that, well, they're open to interpretation? Let's go on and let's look at the next item. So we're looking at number 4 here. So any new arrangements must give the people of Northern Ireland a say in making the laws which govern them. So we'll say that again. So any new arrangements must give the people of Northern Ireland a say in making the laws that govern them. Reports, what we've heard about the deal that is coming down our line is that there was speculation, there was suggestion, is a better word, because it was suggestion. There was stuff, let's just say, that was leaked into the public domain, which would have suggested that perhaps that the Northern Ireland Assembly could decide on, and we'll read this again. So number 4, give the people of Northern Ireland a say in making the laws which govern them. Okay. So there was speculation, there was stuff put into the public domain that the Northern Ireland Assembly would be the best people to decide with reference to any new laws which governs the people of Northern Ireland. Now, when you look at the Northern Ireland Assembly, when you understand that what the British government have done in the Northern Ireland Assembly is that what they have done, and they've done this, they have taken away the cross-community aspect of any vote which will go through that assembly for a vote in 2024, which would actually vote the protocol into being. Now, they've done that once, and the courts have said, right through to the Supreme Court, there was a judicial review, there was an appeal against the judicial review, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the argument on behalf of the government was that Westminster is sovereign, and Westminster Parliament can do whatever they want. So what's to stop Westminster Parliament from actually removing cross-community consent from within the Northern Ireland Assembly? And if it is agreed that the Northern Ireland Assembly would be the people's voice, and this is number 4, so it says, give the people of Northern Ireland a say in making the laws which govern them. So let's say that your say was the Stormont executive, and the cross-community consent is removed, and the British government have formed for actually having removed this. What happens then if there's any new laws that come in from the EU and the majority, the minorities conglomerate which gang together and become the majority? What they do is they vote the DUP out, and any new laws coming from the EU, well, they're thrust upon us against our will. Now, there was another suggestion, or should I say there was more stuff put into the public domain with reference how that it is that people in Northern Ireland would have a say over their laws. Well, if there was anything new coming from the EU, it could be put to a court in Northern Ireland is also what has been suggested. Or if there was any disputes, it could be put to a court in Northern Ireland, and the court could actually decide whether it's lawful or whether it's not. And well, you see, that doesn't give the people of Northern Ireland a say. That doesn't give the representatives of Unionist people of Northern Ireland a say. And if it was to go through the Northern Ireland Assembly, nor would it give the Unionist people in Northern Ireland a say in terms of political representation, because it would be overridden by Sinn Féin, the SDLP, the Alliance Party, and possibly even the Ulster Unionist Party. So we look at this number 4. So give the people of Northern Ireland a say in making the laws in which govern them. Well, I would like to know what that actually means from within this DUP 7 tests. So let's now move on to number 5. Result in no checks on goods going from NI to GB or from GB to NI and remaining in NI. Okay, so So any new arrangements must result in no checks on goods going from NI to GB, that's Northern Ireland to England, Scotland and Wales, or from England, Scotland and Wales to Northern Ireland and remaining in Northern Ireland. Now, forgive me for saying this, but this landing zone of which I've already spoken, the landing zone which Doug Beattie said that he put into place, the Ulster Unionist Party put into place in 2019, the landing zone which effectively was, people, and we studied this in an in-depth way, this landing zone was the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. This landing zone of which Doug Beattie talks about is that there's going to be a lifting of the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and the permanently transplanting that border in Larne and Belfast and in Warrenpoint, in where that there's going to be red lanes for goods going to the EU, green lane for goods with trusted trader scheme for goods going to Northern Ireland, in where that there's going to be regulatory and customs checks, EU inspired regulatory and customs checks, in where that there's going to be data, digital data given to the EU. Now, I have to go through all this just to explain what this actually means, and what it is that the DUP's 7 tests actually mean. Well, again, we're going to go back and we're going to read this. So it says in number 5 that any new arrangements must result in no checks on goods from Northern Ireland to England, Scotland and Wales, and from England, Scotland and Wales to Northern Ireland. So what does that mean? No checks. Does that mean, I wonder, is it in the DUP's mind, in their frame of mind, that green channel for goods with digital checking in a border on the Irish Sea between England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, in where the data is going to be gathered, and it's already been done, it's already been tested, it's being tested as you speak between the Inland Revenue and the EU. So this is where they're headed with this. This is where they're going. There's going to be checks on those goods. The data is going to be given to the EU, and the EU are literally, well, they are dictating the terms in where that you, if you're a unionist, you have to have a border between you, England, Scotland and Wales. So I don't know how the DUP is going to get around that one, but I see in number 5 that, well, any new arrangements must result in no checks on goods going from NI to GB or GB to NI. So again, we will be watching this like a hawk, and we'll be looking to ensure that, well, we'll be looking for some clarification from the DUP in exactly what they mean. So why, ask yourself, why is it that we find the need to do this? Why do we constantly find the need to do this? I'm going to be open and honest with people. I don't trust the hierarchy of the DUP. I don't trust politicians. I don't trust the British government. I don't trust the EU. I don't trust the Irish government. I don't trust Sinn Féin. I don't trust the Ulster Unionist Party. I don't trust the SDLP. In fact, I find it hard these days to trust any political party that has any say in the governing of people. And I have good reason for being this way. Well, we've all seen over the last few years how that these people, how that they overestimate what it is that they're put in place for. Politicians are put in place to serve and protect the people, and they think that they're put in place to rule over us, and in a way that they can do whatever they want. Well, that's not the case. That's not what happens in a democracy. That's what happens in well, communism. That's what happens in a totalitarian regime. The United Kingdom is a democracy, and we'll be looking to ensure that it remains a democracy going forward. So I don't trust the DUP, and that's why that I find myself wanting to look into the detail of what it is that they're proposing. Now, we're going to come to a conclusion on all of this very, very soon. So number 6, to ensure no regulatory borders develop between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. So we're going to read that again, and we're going to try to, any new arrangements must ensure no regulatory borders develop between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Now, I see some clever wording there, and again, you've got to excuse me for being the way that I am. You know, the Belfast Agreement, 1998, it was later admitted by Jonathan Powell, Tony Blair's chief aide, that the Belfast Agreement was written in constructive ambiguity. It was written in wording that means one thing but can mean another. It was written in wording that means one thing to one party and a completely different thing to another party. So what is it that I see in number 6 here? And I'm reading this from a unionist standpoint, and it is absolutely within my rights, within your rights, within everyone's rights to hold these politicians to account, to expose what it is that we see, and to ensure that we get answers, and to insist that they cannot do this in our names. We elected them. We elected them to serve and protect the people, the Unionist people of Northern Ireland, specifically the DUP, and they can't move on. There's a few people at the top of the DUP, possibly 7 people that would be in the decision-making process. The DUP is a large party, and well, by and large, is it right? Is it right that 7 people can decide the fate of the Unionist people of Northern Ireland? This is why that we want to hold these people to account. This is why that we insist that other people hold them to account. So let's read that again, and let me tell you exactly what I see when I read number 6 here. Ensure no, now here's the word. There's a little word popped in here in the middle. Ensure no new, N-E-W, new regulatory borders develop between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Is that the sleight of hand? Is the application of that little word new? So let me explain where we are right now. At this present time, we have customs and regulatory checks between Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales. EU-inspired customs and regulatory checks. That's what the protocol does. It provides for checks on goods. What we also know is that the British government are currently building border checkpoints to check goods. They say that they're going to be destined for the EU. That's still customs and regulatory checks that no other part of the United Kingdom actually have. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove and show conclusively that we have right now customs and regulatory checks in the Irish Sea, and not between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, where the customs and regulatory checks should be. There was a court case not too long ago with Mr. Poots, and well, what had developed from that court case is that the British government are now recognising the entry point to the EU is in Larne, in Belfast and in Warrenpoint, between England, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. So there are customs and regulatory checks as we speak. Under the landing zone agreement, which seems to be what has been in place from 2019, those customs and regulatory checks will remain. There'll be red channels for goods being checked to go into the EU. There'll be a green lane in where there'll be a digital border and digital data will be supplied to the EU. That is, people, a customs and regulatory check. Now, the DUP, we know, have already accepted the check for goods in a red channel, but I don't know how they're going to get around this green channel. Now, I then look at these 7 tests, and this is where we have to be very, very particular in terms of little words which just pop in, which change the meaning of something. Ensure that no quote-unquote new regulatory border develops between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that, well, we're okay with the existing regulatory and customs checks, but as long as, and I'll read it again, number 6, ensure no new regulatory borders develop between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Are we as Unionists being swindled by the party that we put in place to serve and protect us? Now, I have every right to ask that, And I'm asking that on behalf of every single unionist in Northern Ireland. The reports in the press the last few days say that the DUP's 7 tests are met, that there's a deal coming within the next couple of weeks. We hear that Jeffrey Donaldson suggests to Reuters at the weekend that we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the possible. In other words, if he actually said that, he's preparing to compromise. That's what he's doing. Make no mistake, he's preparing to compromise. We have said this from day one, that Jeffrey Donaldson is a weak leader. Jeffrey Donaldson would be looking after himself, the DUP, and not Northern Ireland. Now, that's a huge claim for me to make. And if anyone wants to take me up on that, if anyone wants to disprove what it is that I am saying, what we at Restore UK are saying, well, I'm inviting them here to come and to talk about it and to show me, as a concerned unionist in Northern Ireland, that I am getting this totally wrong, and the DUP won't back down, that the DUP will insist that Northern Ireland is, well, it has its place fully restored within the UK, with no border between ourselves, England, Scotland and Wales, with no customs or regulatory checks. If there can't be a border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, then it follows, people, that we won the referendum. We, as unionists, voted in that referendum. We took part in a United Kingdom-wide vote. 17.4 plus million people voted in that referendum in the 23rd of June in 2016, and we won. If that Jeffrey Donaldson wants to compromise on our democracy, on our democratic right, on our rights, which is contained within the Act of the Union, specifically Article 6, which is your rights as United Kingdom citizens to be treated on an equal footing with people in England, Scotland and Wales. If Jeffrey Donaldson and the DUP thinks that they're going to compromise on your rights, on my rights, on every other unionist's rights, well, I hope that the DUP, well, they get a resounding absolutely not from every single unionist that lives in Northern Ireland. If they do a dirty deal, if they somehow decide to do a dirty deal, and I don't anticipate that deal would be done until after the May council elections. They know that there's an election coming up. You know, Jeffrey Donaldson, remember what he said on Reuters just a few days ago? And I look, if he said that, if he didn't say that, he needs to come out and say that he didn't say that. In fact, it's best that we maybe write a letter, send an email to DUP party headquarters with a couple of questions on it, and we'll ask and we'll seek for clarification on these 7 tests. If Jeffrey Donaldson said we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the possible, does that mean the DUP are going to compromise? And especially when there's nothing left to compromise on. Now we're looking at number 7 in their 7 tests. So preserve the letter and spirit of NI's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement by requiring consent from a majority of its citizens for any diminution, I can hardly say that word, of its status as part of the UK. There's those words which sometimes I get my tongue around. So again, so preserve the letter and the spirit of NI's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement. So the courts were arguing. They were arguing that the constitutional guarantee in Article 1 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, and that's where it is, which says that, well, if there is to be any constitutional change in Northern Ireland, there would be a referendum put to the people in Northern Ireland, and there would be a follow-up referendum put to the people in Southern Ireland, in the Irish Republic. So that was what was known as the principle of consent. And this is what number 7 refers to. So preserve the letter and spirit of NI's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement. okay, by requiring consent from a majority of its citizens. That's exactly what it's talking about. So the spirit of Article 1 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998 is that there can't be constitutional change in Northern Ireland without the citizens of Northern Ireland first going to a referendum to agree to it, and then a follow-up referendum in the south. Now, what we learned through the courts is that I'm going to say before we go on that there is constitutional change in Northern Ireland right now. We are now part of a different, let's just say, trading bloc than England, Scotland, and Wales. And remember that the Article 6 of the Act of the Union stated that we should be on an equal footing with England, Scotland, and Wales. That's our rights to trade within the United Kingdom internal market. It's our right as Unionists to do that. Now, what they've done is they've disapplied our rights to trade, and they've done that in the Parliament because Parliament is sovereign and Parliament can do anything it wants, and that's what we learned through the Supreme Court. Now, what Jeffrey's saying is that this should be reinstated again, or what the DUP are saying in their 7 tests. But now that this Supreme Court judgment has came out, well, and it has been successfully argued by the government that well, the consent principle only applies, and it was only ever meant to apply, and this is the constructive ambiguity part, or this constructive ambiguity way in which that the Belfast Agreement was written. So Unionists were sold the Belfast Agreement based on the Unionist safe that you have a principle of consent and there can be no constitutional change in Northern Ireland until there's a referendum put to the people, and it takes the people of Northern Ireland to agree to that constitutional change. You see, as far as Unionists were concerned in 1998, that's those that voted for the Belfast Agreement. I didn't particularly myself, but that's what they were guaranteed, and that's how they were selling the agreement, is that, well, what did David Trimble say? The Union is safe. The Act of the Union, which is the Union, is still in place, is what David Trimble said. And we have this wonderful thing called a principle of consent. Well, it has been successfully argued that the principle of consent, and this is what the government's solicitors were arguing throughout the judicial review, the appeal to the judicial review, and the Supreme Court case, they were saying that the principle of consent only applies to the referendum, the final handover of Northern Ireland. So the principle of consent means that you can chip away at Northern Ireland's constitutional position right down to having really nothing left of that constitutional position. And then you can put a referendum to the people at some future point in where that the final handover could actually occur. So the DUP are saying in number 7 here that to preserve the letter and spirit of NIA's Northern Ireland's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement requiring consent from a majority of its citizens. Now, if the DUP are to follow the law or to respect the Supreme Court's decision, let me make something absolutely clear here. I was part of a group of people that took the case to the Supreme Court. We went to the Supreme Court. I sat in the Supreme Court over the few days of the Supreme Court hearing. And, I know that I didn't like what the Supreme Court said. I have to respect the decision that they made, because they made their decision. They made their decision based on a fact. And the fact is this, that Parliament is sovereign and Parliament can do whatever it wants. Now, that doesn't say that our arguments were beaten. That doesn't say that our arguments were actually wrong, because they weren't. But because Parliament is sovereign and they can do whatever they want, well, it doesn't matter. We have been, they haven't been treated fair. They haven't been fair with us. They have removed us from England, Scotland, and Wales. They have separated Northern Ireland. They have caused constitutional change. They have put a border in the North Channel. They have removed the democracy from Northern Ireland in the Brexit referendum. We made up part of that 17.4 plus million people, and we weren't afforded the same democracy as people in England, Scotland, and Wales. And all of those injustices Even although that they were wrong, they are morally wrong. The Supreme Court were only judging based on the law, and the law is this. The law is that Parliament is sovereign, and Parliament can do whatever it wants, no matter why it's right or it's wrong or it's not just. You know, they can do whatever they want. So for that reason, we've got to respect the Supreme Court and their decision because they were applying the law. So let's now take that logic and now let's apply that logic, that same logic to the DUP hierarchy. And if the Supreme Court, if it was argued in the Supreme Court that the principle of consent only applies to the point in where that there's a referendum here in Northern Ireland, well, what does Test 7 actually mean here? If the DUP respect the Supreme Court decision, if they respect the law of the land, if they respect that Parliament is sovereign, well, number 7 in that test actually means nothing, because it has already been successfully argued that the principle of consent only applies to the final handover referendum in Northern Ireland. So that doesn't even create the circumstances by which that Northern Ireland could be re-established as part of the United Kingdom, or it doesn't do anything. So looking at these 7 tests, and again looking at them from a unionist perspective, any new arrangements must fulfil Article 6. That is very weak, very, very weak in the words, using that word fulfill. I would have rather that read, it should restore Article 6 of the Act of the Union, not fulfill, because fulfill means that it can still be disapplied and it can be worked around in a way that, well, we still get the same thing anyway, but we're void of our rights that is contained within Article 6. In other words, that we are now not on an equal footing with people in England, Scotland and Wales. Number 2, avoid any diversion of trade. Well, you see, you can avoid diversions by putting in digital borders and giving digital data to the EU, which is customs and regulatory checks. You can do all of that, which will avoid any diversions of trade. You can do that, so the border can still be there, but you can avoid the diversions. I would have said, well, there's got, avoid any diversions of trade. Listen, trade needs to be reinstated to the way that it was before the protocol was put in place. That's how to argue something like that. Then we look at number 3. So any new arrangement must not constitute a border in the Irish Sea. And again, we believe that that's down to interpretation, because what they are going to argue is that, well, a green lane for goods coming to Northern Ireland with regulatory and customs checks, and we have told you that that's what it is. They are going to try to argue, I believe, that, that does not constitute a border in the Irish Sea. That's number 3. Number 4, give people of Northern Ireland a say in making the laws which govern them. That means the Northern Ireland Assembly, or through the courts, and we've already learned by taking things to the courts in Northern Ireland, well, your argument can be spot on, your argument can be just, your argument can be, well, everything that you argued for in a respectful way, in a truthful way, in a way that literally is moral and just, but a court can find differently. So I wouldn't like my future to be put in the hands of a Belfast court right now, nor would I like my future to be put in the hands of the Northern Ireland Assembly, most especially whenever the British government, it has been shown that what they can do is they can remove the cross-community aspect of what the Northern Ireland Assembly was put in place for. So number 5, result in no checks on goods going from Northern Ireland to GB. I'll say that in a better way. Result in no checks on goods going from Northern Ireland to England, Scotland and Wales, or from England, Scotland and Wales to Northern Ireland. So result in no checks on goods. Well, no checks on goods means that a digital border can do this for you. And we know that this is what they're actually putting together right now. And it's all over the press right now. It's being floated in the public domain that the new deal meets the 7 tests of the DUP. Now watch this in the next few days. and listen very carefully. So no, result in no checks and goods going from NI to GB. Well, I'm going to say that a red and a green channel with customs and regulatory checks, with trusted trader schemes, is checks. If it looks like a border, if it acts like a border, if it checks and gives data like a border, then it is a border. And if there's got to be a border in, well, between us, England, Scotland, and Wales, and no border between the Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, well, is that a deal? Or is that, as Jeffrey would have said, that we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the possible? So we've got a compromise. Unionist, again, has to give. So ensure no regulatory borders develop between. So again, we've crossed that line. Ensure no new regulatory borders develop between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. What does that mean? People, I think that what we've done is that what I was going to do is I was going to go over that, and I was going to look at it from two standpoints. I was going to look at it from a unionist standpoint, and I was going to look at it from an EU standpoint. You know, I look forward to seeing what it is that they've got rustled up in the next few weeks. I look forward to seeing, do the DUP try to sell this? I look forward to trying to see, do they wait to after the council elections before they try to move on ratifying such a deal? We don't know what's in the deal, but we have heard things being leaked. And I have to say that what is being leaked does not meet with, well, there's only one test, one real test. And the real test is this. If there can't be a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, then it follows that there can't be a border, any type of border, between Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. And that is the bridge that unionism needs to actually commit to dying upon, if that's what's necessary. If the protocol isn't removed in its fullness, that's what Jeffrey Donaldson promised us on the run-up to them getting elected into the Assembly. He said that the protocol must go and the democratic rights of the people of Northern Ireland, he says, should be fully restored. And I have to give him that. He said should be fully restored. But I understood that perfectly well, that the protocol has to go and the democratic rights of the people of Northern Ireland should be fully restored. As a unionist, we can't give any more. We've nothing left to compromise on, and we shouldn't be expected to, well, as Jeffrey Donaldson would have said, we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the possible. People, we're going to close at that. I think that we've said enough. I think that we've highlighted it enough. We'll make some short clips out of this stream, which we've prepared this evening. And what we will then do is that we'll make them available over the next few days. So again, we're going to be coming back hopefully before the end of the week. We've been working on something over the past few weeks, and this is huge. This is really anti-democratic, what it is that we've uncovered. And we have the fine detail of some things, and we're going to go for a full expose on how that it is that, well, your society is being, I'm going to say, diverted, has been, it's been destroyed before your very eyes, and seemingly your politicians don't want to do anything about it. So we'll see you all soon. Thanks very much for coming along. And I'm just going to play us out with an appropriate item, let's just say. And thanks very much for staying with us. Again, we couldn't get onto Twitter. I don't know why, but what we'll do is we'll cut some short clips and we'll make it available to Twitter. I just wonder, as the powers that be, well, are they trying to stop us yet again? We'll not be deterred. We'll continue to go on and do what it is that we have to do. So I'm just looking for a little clip here that we should be, yeah, here we go. I'm going to play this little clip. And since 1994 going forward, it is now proven conclusively that unionism in Northern Ireland, well, they were swindled with the Belfast Agreement. They were swindled with an appeasement process that was, well, which only has one destination. Those who negotiated that agreement, well, at least they've had the decency to suggest right now that, well, they were conned, they were swindled back then. Isn't it time that unionists actually stood together and said, enough is enough? We have nothing left to compromise on. I mean, this is our last stand, people, and we can't let the DUP get things wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play from a little poem written by Jim Verner and myself, and we call this The Belfast Agreement. It was a disguise. See you all soon.
I can't help but wonder why so many people, they had to die for being British in our own land, murdered by cards with their evil hand. The IRA crept back to their bed after leaving so many people dead. A soldier, a cop, a father, a son, a woman, a child, just anyone. But the Unionist people, they did not lie down, fought and defended the red hand and the crown. We stood proud, ready and able. The IRA cried to come to the table. The Belfast Agreement, it was a disguise. It was built for appeasement, swindle and lies. The peace is a farce, the guns are still there, and London's afraid of another bomb scare. Appeasement after appeasement, day after day, provos in government still getting their way, and our two big parties, well, what can I say? They are sitting in Stormont with the IRA, not listening to the people who put them in place. They ask for support, then they lie to your face. A united Unionist party, some say we need, but there's too much corruption, lies and greed. I can't help but wonder why so many people, they had to die for being British in our own land. You can never shake a terrorist's hand. Think of our country, the red hand on the crown. Listen to the people, stop letting us down. Our leaders have blown the chance to make things right. The whole of unionism, I mean the people, we must unite. So we reach out again with offer of partnership. No time for politicians hell-bent on dictatorship. No puppets, no lackeys, our people deserve better. We will not be sucked in with promises in letter. Meaningful and proactive is the only game in town. We long for a day when politicians stop letting us down. You have one more chance at putting things right. But this time we demand that you stick to the fight. A roadmap must be drawn, agreed by everyone. No hierarchy, no pulling rank is exactly what must be done. An army of people must be put together with weapons of words, which will remain and abide forever. United we stand, divided we most definitely fall.